Before we get started, we've got in a word of prayer.
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the day. We thank you for love. We thank you for freedom and liberty, Father, that you give us. We ask, oh Father, that you bless these proceedings, give us wisdom and discernment in making decisions. And we ask for your blessings as you watch over our nation, as you watch over our state, and you watch over us. And we'll thank you in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you. All right, with a quorum being present, we will call the January 31st meeting of the Insurance and Labor Committee to order. First bill on our agenda is Senate Bill 389, the senator from the 54th, distinguished veteran. Welcome, Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have Joe Ferrero here with me to help present this bill. It's a pretty simple bill. Senate Bill 389, the National Guard Life Insurance Program. This is basically just it's something that's already being done. This is really just to codify it into law to make sure that we're not acting out of bounds of the law, especially when it comes to federal provisions of law. This Without this legislation, the Georgia National Guardsmen face challenges in accessing the state-sponsored life insurance program, potentially leading to gaps in coverage and benefits alignment with federal provisions. This legislation aims to streamline and ensure seamless integration of state and federal law, thereby providing comprehensive and accessible life insurance options to the members of the Georgia National Guard. Would you like to add anything?
So this does, it codifies what is, I'm sorry.
All right, Joe Ferrara.
Yes, sir.
Spell your last name for us. I think we can spell Joe.
Yes, sir.
Spell your last name and who are you with?
Yes, sir.
Georgia National Guard? Or?
Yes, sir. Joe Ferrero, Ferrero. I'm the Deputy Adjutant General for the Georgia National Guard.
Great to have you with us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much. You're not on the state election board.
No, sir.
It's another Ferrara, right? Okay, thank you.
You bet. So just to briefly reiterate, so the National Guard was not covered under Servicemen Group Life Insurance up until 1974, which is a federal program. So we had initiated this program to fill that gap. In 1974, the federal law changed and did include guardsmen in Servicemen's Group Life Insurance, but they made a special provision in the federal statute not to cross out what we'd been doing at the state level. However, being state-sponsored, it would make, and it's just something that, for some reason, it never really came to light. But it would be helpful for us to have that codified in state law, so it just could continue on and would put into effect a structure that if things change in the future, that there's a mechanism in place to adapt for future change.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Question for the author. Senator Robertson.
Yes, sir. Senator, can you help me understand what is the National Guard Association of Georgia? I think is how it's in the bill. It's the National Guard Association of Georgia. On line 32.
The National Guard Association of Georgia is, that is literally the association that brings the guardsmen together to be able to purchase life insurance.
Okay, so is this like some umbrella organization?
If I may, sir, it is an organization that consists of National Guard officers, Army and Air National Guard officers. We have a similar organization for enlisted personnel as well, but it is an umbrella association.
So
to
is
speak.
there a board of directors?
There
or-
is.
Okay, who elects the board of directors?
The guardsmen. It's independent of the adjutant general.
And that's what yeah. So it's a, for lack of a better term, a fraternal type organization or
A professional organization.
professional
yes, sir.
organization. Okay, and okay. So the men and women who serve in the Georgia National Guard are the ones who elect these board members to represent them when it comes to benefits.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Senator Harvin, are you 9? Do you have a question?
Yes, sir. Question, I was looking here at the verbiage, line 23, it says provides an opportunity to the members. I'm assuming that this is an optional to the guardsmen to be able to purchase the life insurance, and is this without, I'm assuming without a physical, it's group type in coverage they can buy, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other question I had is that I know I'm in the insurance business, many life insurance policies have war exclusions, things of that nature, insurrection, some of the things. I'm assuming this does not.
No, sir.
Okay,
This is to cover them in all
Okay,
circumstances.
so if they were called up, that would be and I'm assuming it says in 32 that you would select an insurer. Have y'all already done that, or what's that? Are you at liberty to be able to tell who that is?
Sir, the association does that
Okay.
kind of on our behalf, but they do that, and I'm sorry to say I don't recall the name of the carrier on
Okay.
that right now.
Okay,
I can certainly find that out and get that to you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Senator Mary, you have a question?
It was the same question, how the insurance came.
All right. We have another very distinguished guest and veteran with us today, Commissioner King. General King, thank you for being with us. It's great to see you. You had signed up to comment on this bill.
Yes, I must disclose my bias. I am a member of the Georgia National Guard Association, and I am also have a policy with this organization, so I can explain the mechanism since I'm the guy with the gray hair. Not as much gray hair as Joe does, but I could talk to you about the benefits and why this is a great program on behalf of Georgia Guardsmen.
We'd love to hear it.
First of all, these policies are offered to guardsmen to cover the immediate needs of a family when they lose a service member. Within 24 to 48 hours, they're there to help cover especially the funeral expenses. The Army has a great life insurance program, but it takes a tremendous amount of time for that to kick in. And this is almost immediate, and they're there they work very closely with the casualty assistance officer to get to the families, to get a check in their hand so they can at least deal with the immediate needs. And that's what the great value of this organization, of this program. This is something that really helps in our recruiting and retention of young soldiers. People, because a young man, a young woman is not thinking about this, but this is for the family. And so this codifies what's been going on for many, many years. It's a great program. It's low cost. It's low cost, but it gives the opportunity And as a National Guard Association, it has nothing to do with the chain of command. Very seldom does the chain of command actually participate on the board. They're elected by the members of the association to look after the interests. And the association, it's the opportunity for the association in their civilian capacity to come and advocate for policy changes to legislators, to members of Congress. So that's the value of, because the chain of command can't do that as members of the executive branch. And so that's the sausage making on why this is an important organization that advocates on behalf of Georgia Guardsmen. I hope I helped answer that question you had originally.
Yes, sir. I'm always suspicious when you start answering questions, but you did answer that one, Mr.
You
King.
know,
Thank you.
You trained me well, sir. You know, but you know, the association, you know, the company, this program goes and selects a number of carriers to select, you know, the fiduciary who they can get the best return, and the key is stability. And they will go under the same restrictions than any other life insurance program. They go through the same licensing, they go through the same auditing than any other insurance product in the state of Georgia does. And so I would tell you that I'm a big supporter of this program because I've benefited and my soldiers have benefited as a result of this opportunity.
Well, both of y'all, thank you very, very much for your service, and thank you for bringing this measure to us. You probably had us at hello, so we're gonna see if what's the will of the committee. Got a motion to pass, got a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. All right, it passed unanimously.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck in
I appreciate
rules,
it, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Payne. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
See, not bad for a paratrooper.
I kept my feet and knees together.
All right, next is Senate Bill 307. Senator Kirkpatrick, you can,
Want me to present from here? Is that okay, or do you want me to go
whichever you're most comfortable doing, just tell me your mic number. Is it 3 or 4?
3?
See if it
Thank
works.
you. You hear me okay?
I think
All
so.
right. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 307 is another step on prior authorization. And as many of you know, we've passed legislation on prior authorization before, which is the process that providers have to go through to get approval for medical procedures. Since we started down this road by passing Senate Bill 80 and Senate Bill 341, there have been some changes in the marketplace and some changes with CMS. CMS just passed a new prior authorization rule January 23rd, as a matter of fact. And I think the next thing we're going to be facing is the transition to electronic prior authorization. Many companies that are insurance carriers are loosening their prior authorization requirements, including Aetna, Humana, Cigna, United, and Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's the ones I've found so far. And this bill is commonly known as a gold card bill. It's based on the Louisiana version of this concept. And what it basically does is it says that insurers that utilize prior authorization requirements need to or shall implement and maintain a program that allows for selective application of reductions in requirements based on performance and adherence to evidence-based medicine. So in other words, if I'm ordering tests, surgery, whatever, and my requests are getting approved most or all of the time, then that would, hopefully, there would be a program that would allow me to participate in a different way, a more streamlined way than people that were not performing at that level. And the idea is to streamline this for both sides, for the provider side and also the carrier side. And this would be reported to the insurance commissioner, so each insurer would report what their program is to the insurance commissioner. But this bill does not tell them how they have to do it. They can design their program in many different ways. We just need for our commissioner to know what the plan is. The only thing that I caught at the last minute is, I dropped this bill last year, and so the effective date, we're going to need to amend that. Currently, it's at January 1st of this year, which obviously is come and gone, and the reporting was set up for July 1st of 2024, and that would need to move back to July 1st of 2025. So it's pretty straightforward. I have not heard any concerns from any of the parties that are impacted by this bill, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Are you aware of any healthcare insurance providers that are already doing this? Are they allowed to do this? This is a shall do it, but are they allowed to do it, and are any of them doing it?
There are a lot of companies that already have this type of program. I don't have a list for you, but it's a common practice, and I think it's becoming more common because of what I said. It saves everybody time and therefore money to try to be more specific about the requirements of the program based on the quality of the performance that has happened. And we all like evidence-based medicine, and I think this facilitates that. There are a number of states that have passed bills that are very similar to this, and this one I think is pretty straightforward, and for that reason, I don't think there's been opposition to this bill.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All right, what's the will of the committee?
Motion to pass.
Motion to pass. Do I have a second? Have a second.
Yeah. Here's the
All
line
right.
numbers. Here's
Any
the line
discussion?
numbers.
I'd like to make an amendment. Senator Robertson.
Yes, sir. Want to amend, I marked them here, let's see, line
26.
Take from July 1, 2024 to January 1, 2025.
I'm sorry, July.
Yeah, it should be July.
Yeah.
On line 31, it would be January 1, 2024 to January 1, 2025. Mr. Chairman.
Let's go through that again. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir, I apologize. On line 26, I want to change July 1, 2024 to July 1, 2025. And on line 31, I want to change January 1, 2024 to January 1, 2025.
All right, that's in the form of a motion.
Yes, sir.
Do I have a second for the amendment?
Can I second my own bill?
I think you could second.
Okay. Yeah,
I need a second for the amendment. I
Yeah,
think
the
she
amendment.
could.
yeah. Okay.
All right, all right. Motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, the amendment carries. Now we got a motion and a second on the bill. Any more discussion? As the bill as amended, so this is LC 520307 as amended by committee. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Senate Bill, three, how many people got signed up? All right. I'm gonna use my chairman's discretion and skip over 362 at the moment, and because we got a good many people signed up to speak on that, and possibly Senate Bill 334 might not take, it certainly shouldn't take as much time. It might not take very long. So we'll give Senator Albers the floor, and this is LC 394004. Floor is yours, Senator Albers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of this august committee. Senate Bill 334 is Helping Firefighters Beat Cancer Act. Through the great wisdom of this General Assembly, many years ago, we passed the Firefighter Cancer Act, which allows those of us, my brothers and sisters in the fire service, to have an insurance policy up to $25,000 if they contract certain cancers that are almost imminent in the fire service. As a firefighter, we are many, many, many times greater risk of contracting multiple forms of cancer. And due to the risk of the job and the wisdom of our General Assembly, we passed that bill. Since that time, I can proudly report to you that it has made all of the world's difference to the people who have been suffering from cancer, both to themselves who have been battling it, who thank God put that in remission, and even to their families for those who we've sadly lost along the way. This is really a technical cleanup to that bill, and simply it just makes sure that if someone is already a firefighter and they move from one fire department to the other, that they don't start the clock over again, not be able to get their coverage immediately. I want to thank the Firefighters Association, the Fire Chiefs Association, the Professional Firefighters Association, as well as all the other affiliate associations for coming together and bringing this forward, because if someone moves from one department to another department, we don't want them to begin as if they were a brand new firefighter. If they've got 12 months of continuous service, that would simply just move over with them. Again, it's a very simple bill in its form. It will make all the difference in the world to those that might need it, and I believe the impact, again, will be negligible, but it'll be very beneficial. With that, I'll yield to some questions.
All right. There was a little history on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Albers, but there was because of the reasons you enumerated, the higher prevalence in cancer, et cetera, that those are normal diseases of life, so they weren't being covered under workers' comp. The cities and counties basically created a policy to cover this, and the cities and counties are paying the premium for this policy.
That is correct.
And that's the law that they have to do that. We did this 5-6 years ago, probably.
Yeah, it was 2015, actually.
Okay. This is a new mandate on that. Because of that, we've got there's on statute, we have to send any kind of health care mandate over to the insurance commissioner's office for their assessment and response. So I want to draw your attention to the letter in your folder dated January 26, back from Commissioner King, where they analyzed this bill, and it's kind of impossible to determine a dollar cost, but they do expect that it will increase the cost of coverage a minor amount, is the way I read their letter. But you can read it for yourself. It's in the bill. In the package, in the folder. Everybody see that? So we got some questions. We don't have anybody signed up to speak, but we do have questions. Vice Chairman Harbin.
Sir, I was on that committee when we made that change. Just curious, because workers' comp, usually there is not a limitation on that. This has a specific limitation of a lump sum of $25,000, and it was also my remembrance is that the employee, one of the issues was when the employee retired or left, he could take that coverage with him, because many times after retirement, the cancer would occur, and therefore there was no coverage, or you had to fight back to say this was workers' comp related. Am I correct that the limit here is $25,000 as a lump sum? Is that correct?
Yes, the limit is $25,000, and if someone leaves the fire service, they can continue and pay that premium on their own if they so choose.
Can they increase that amount of coverage from that standpoint if they wanted to? Is there any?
They would work with that individual carrier to determine what they could or could not offer, but that would be up to the individual at that point.
Okay. Okay, doke. Thank you, sir.
Senator Robertson.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I'm just looking at this, and I was not here. I was gainfully employed in 2015. But, well, it's debatable. Employed firefighter and volunteer firefighter are distinguished in the bill as two separate things, correct?
They are.
Okay.
Both are covered.
And both are covered, but the employed firefighter receives 60% of their monthly salary with the fire department, or a monthly benefit of $5,000. That's right?
Correct. You're talking about current law, not change.
Correct.
Yeah,
I'm
that
not-
that
yeah.
was there before we
No,
even passed it.
exactly. I was
Yeah.
just trying to understand. And then the volunteer member is just a flat 1,500.
That is correct.
And what this bill does is basically if somebody moves from is the volunteer firefighter, if they move from a volunteer fire department into a fully employed fire department, the time they spent as a volunteer firefighter travels with them. Is that correct?
Yeah, the way it works is this is a separate from what you saw that hasn't changed in the bill. That was legacy. What we set up back years ago was every city and county, this is what the chairman was saying, purchased a policy of up to $25,000 for each one of those individuals in order to compensate them in the time of cancer impacting their lives. What the difference was is you had to be that fire department for 12 months to get that. The issue is we've had people who've been with the fire department for 20 years, and then they went to another job to be a firefighter, and they lost their coverage for a year. This just says if you've been a certified firefighter for that long, whether it be volunteer, full-time, part-time, doesn't really matter, that you can just continue that coverage throughout that time.
So if the volunteer leaves and goes to if the volunteer firefighter in Harris County leaves and goes to the full-time fire department in Columbus, then their benefit increases should they get cancer from $1,500 to $5,000.
Yeah, and that was in the law long before we ever touched this bill back then. But then on top of that, they wouldn't have a gap in the $25,000 that could help them.
And that was what I was trying to get.
Correct,
Thank you. I
yes.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, any further questions? What's the will of the committee on this Senate Bill 334? Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
committee members.
All right. Let's see. Three minutes each. Okay, next we have Senate Bill 362 from the senator from the coast. Beautiful St. Simon's Island. Yeah. All right, Senator, thank you for bringing this to us. Senate Bill 362, LC 540282-EC, is that right? Let's see here.
540282EC.
Okay. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and colleagues. Today I bring you Senate Bill 362 on behalf of Governor Kemp. For 10 straight years, Georgia's been the best state in the nation to do business. This has not been by coincidence. Our state's business-friendly environment is supported first and foremost by our hardworking, well-trained workforce. It is further enhanced by our low taxes, our robust infrastructure network, and our extensive number of public-private partnerships at the state and local level to support economic development projects throughout our state. Equally important to our success is that Georgia is a proud right-to-work state. It's one of 26 states in the nation that is a right-to-work state, and it's been a right-to-work state since 1947, where we've sought to provide protections to hardworking Georgians within the workplace. With that said, this bill seeks to continue the trend by giving prospective, which means in the future, by prospectively requiring companies who agree to accept certain state economic development incentives to respect their employees' rights to a secret ballot election if employees seek to be recognized by a union for collective bargaining purposes, rather than the companies voluntarily granting recognition rights for their employees solely and exclusively based on signed labor organization authorization cards, otherwise known as card checks.
Unlike a secret ballot election, which respects employees' right to privately choose whether or not to be recognized by a union, card checks may, and I say may, be deployed by union organizers to coerce, intimidate, or even harass employees publicly to elect to be recognized by a union, even if some employees may not wish to be recognized in the first place. So by this bill, if any company prospectively executes an agreement with the state to receive certain economic development incentives, the company must agree to not voluntarily grant recognition rights for the employees based on the card checks, if the selection of a bargaining representative may instead be conducted through a secret ballot. Secondly, the company must also agree to not voluntarily disclose an employee's personal contact information to a labor organization or a third party on behalf of a labor organization without an employee's prior written consent unless otherwise required by state or federal law. And lastly, the company must agree to not require a subcontractor to engage in either of the two activities I mentioned previously. So to be clear, this bill applies prospectively in the future. It does not apply to any agreement executed between this state and an employer prior to January 1st, 2025. Additionally, this bill does not preempt federal law, as the National Labor Relations Board and the National Labor Relations Act govern how employees can elect to be recognized by a union within the United States. This bill only targets voluntary actions by a company. And does not prohibit a company from unionizing. Again, it's the voluntary actions by a company, regardless of the outcome of a unionization effort, does not prohibit a company's employees from unionizing. So although state action regarding the ways in which employees seek to be recognized is preempted by the NLRA, the state of Georgia has a very strong interest in how our state incentives are utilized when we seek to attract employers to locate or expand a facility in the #1 state for business. Also, we have a strong interest in protecting hardworking Georgians' rights, where each employee should be free to vote in private without fear of coercion, intimidation, or harassment. Mr. Chairman, also, if I might, let me address what this bill does and what it doesn't do, if I may.
Yes, sir.
What this bill does, it creates an implied term in economic development incentive programs that requires, as a condition of eligibility for incentives, that employers protect employee privacy and choice in the union organizing process. It only applies to companies receiving defined incentives and only at the facility for which such incentives are given. It only applies to agreements signed after the effective date of this legislation, which again is January 1st, 2025. And it only applies for the duration of the performance period under the incentive agreement. Employers must agree to protect employee privacy and not disseminate employee personal contact information to union organizers without employee consent. And employers must agree to allow employees to vote on the issue of union representation in a secret ballot election unless such option is not available under law or existing bargaining agreements. If an employer fails to abide by these terms, the employer will lose eligibility for incentives and trigger a clawback of incentives already distributed for the facility in question. Now, what this bill doesn't do, this bill does not impose any penalty on any employer that did not sign an economic development incentive agreement for the specific programs listed in this bill. This bill does not impose any penalty or remove any incentives based on the outcome of a union election. Only the employer's actions matter for eligibility, not the outcome of the election, of the unionization effort election. This bill does not require an employee to oppose unionization efforts in any action before the NLRB, nor does it require an employer to campaign against unionization. Employers are free to agree to hold union elections. Employers only lose eligibility if they decide to skip the election or the secret ballot election if available, or if they decide to disseminate employee personal information without consent. This bill does not apply to any union governance matters. Union governance is controlled by federal law. And this bill does not remove the eligibility if a secret ballot election is not available, either due to NLRB rules or due to the terms of existing collective bargaining agreements. The only thing that can cause an employer to lose incentive eligibility is an employer's choice to forego an election if the employee could choose to hold an election under a secret ballot. Under federal labor laws, the secret ballot election is the default mechanism for establishing collective bargaining representation. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield for questions.
Thank you, Senator Hodges. Question, Senator Harbin.
Yes, sir, Senator Hodges. Do you know was there an action or was there an event that triggered the need for this bill? Do you know anything?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so just.
Just the fact that we're a right-to-work state.
Okay. In line 13, 14, 15, it talks about incentives, and I'm assuming that's tax credit, that's for funding of any kind, that's the incentive, even though it defines a little bit about it, but then it refers to a bunch of codes. I'm assuming that's any type of state funding whatsoever that goes on, whether funding or credits. Am I correct?
Well, any type of state funding or state help, state incentives for a business relocating to Georgia or expanding in Georgia will be explained, will be negotiated, and will be laid out in a memorandum of understanding. So that memorandum of understanding will lay out the incentives in effect, the nature of the incentives, and also the agreement to abide by the laws that the bill that I'm just explaining to you.
Okay. Also, in the last question, on line 17, it says subject to withholding, and I guess the question would be of 1099 employees, because many times you'll have subcontractors working for you where you're not doing withholding, you're just paying them, and I didn't know whether this applies to anything to deal with 1099 employees at all.
I believe that is,
I wouldn't, let me interject.
all right.
I don't know a whole lot about unionizing, but I wouldn't think a contractor would get to vote on. I mean, I would think employees are the ones that get to vote on whether to be union or not a 1099 contract employee.
And let me mention also that in the if you look at I should have mentioned this, but if you look at the actual bill, the sections 1 and sections 2, section 1, all it does, section 1 amends Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia, Article 1, Chapter 7, and sets up a new code section, this 50-7-19, and provides, as you can see, provides the definitions, and then at lines 34 through 41 lays out the requirements that I just mentioned in the bill. And then in section 2, all it does is adds, it just reiterates, it amends code section 50-8-11 to show that the Department of Community Affairs will investigate potential violations of this new act. That's basically what this does.
All right, Senator Merritt, question for Senator Hodges.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you said that this bill was not preemptive, correct?
Not preempted. It did not preempt federal law.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm a little confused by that statement. Doesn't the National Labor Relations Board, aren't they the comprehensive regulators?
They are indeed.
Okay, so, and that is federal.
That is, but all this bill does, it says that if I have a company and I want to relocate that company into the state of Georgia, and I want to get something for that, I want an incentive, I want something from the people of the state of Georgia to move my company in and to bring jobs and all the good things that come with that, and the state of Georgia allows me incentives to do that, then in return for that, all I'm doing is agreeing that if my company wants to unionize, if my employees want to unionize, that they will be allowed a secret ballot if the secret ballot is allowed under law, under labor law. So that in no way preempts, it in no way preempts federal law. All it does is basically codify that a company and the state of Georgia are going to make an agreement, and the company is going to get something, i.e. incentives, and it's going to give something to the state of Georgia, the jobs that come with it, but they're also going to promise, because we're a right-to-work state, they're going to promise that if their employees want to vote or want to unionize, that as long as that secret ballot is allowed by law, that they'll use that secret ballot.
Okay.
That's it.
I have a few more questions. So, on
You'll
line.
be, I'll recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, could you recognize me for a series of questions?
And you know I'll recognize you.
So, lines 34 and 36.
Line 34 and 36.
We're talking about the
thought I
voluntary grant recognition specifically.
What mic number is she?
Now, voluntary recognition is within the scope of the
just not
NLRA. So the state can't ban voluntary recognition, but here, this is banning voluntary recognition. We're talking about 34 and through 36.
No, well, I disagree with you, Senator. I don't think it's banning it. I think what it says is that you can vote to unionize by the card check system, which you're talking about, or by a secret ballot. And that because your company's getting an incentive from the state, that if you legally can offer the secret ballot, that you will.
Okay. But if I'm reading the bill correctly, to receive the economic incentives, you have to have satisfied 34 through lines 40. And voluntary recognition, again, is in the scope of the NLRA.
It's one method that's in the scope. Secret ballot's also there.
Okay. But again, that is federal. I mean, that is, the NLRA has jurisdiction over.
Which is why it says voluntarily.
Yeah.
So if, as he mentioned, if federal law requires them to do it another way,
Right.
and they do it that way, that's not doing it voluntarily.
And I'm certainly not a labor lawyer, but as I understand it, that in some instances a secret ballot would be off the table. I think if there's an existing labor agreement, if you have if the employees or the labor agreement that's been negotiated says that any future votes will be done by card check, then you have to do it that way. And then I think also, I believe there's been some instances where some employers try to influence their employees and their decisions about maybe coerce them into voting against unionizing. Sometimes the National Labor Relations Board will step in and impose the union on a company if they're bad actors, if they don't do what they're supposed to. So I think in those two instances, then a secret ballot would be off the table. Again, all this says is that if it's legally on the table, that you'll use it. And you're using it because you're accepting incentives from the state of Georgia.
Okay. We're gonna, we got a lot of people signed up to speak. I'm gonna let Senator Robertson, he had his light on, and then I'm gonna let the people that have signed up speak 3 minutes apiece. And then we can ask, we'll bring the author back up.
Right.
Hold your questions. If the people speaking don't answer your question, then we'll ask him.
Yeah, to be clear, I think what y'all were just discussing on line 31, it says to be eligible to receive an economic development incentive, an employer shall not, with respect to any work or service for the employer for which the economic development incentive is to be based, and then we got a colon there, and then it goes to the voluntarily grant recognition, voluntary disclose, and require a subcontractor to engage. So I think the important part of that is on line 31 where it says shall not.
But then also, Senator, it's qualified at the end. It says, if the selection of a bargaining representative may instead be conducted through secret ballot.
Right. I think, so those box that in, and I think it makes it very clear. Thank you. That's
Thank you.
Okay, 3 minutes for the outside guests that have asked to speak, and we'll go first with Nicholas Stanajevic. And, yeah, you can sit back. And Nicholas, if you would introduce yourself and tell us who you're with, and then then we'll start your timer, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Chairman, Senators. My name is Nicholas Stanojevic. I am a labor attorney. I work for the union-side labor law firm Quinn, Connor, Weaver, Davies, and Rucco. We have offices in Atlanta and in Birmingham. I'm coming on my own behalf to speak about this bill, to talk about what it does and why it is, in fact, preempted by federal law.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. So first, I wanted to do a quick review of Senate Bill 362 to discuss the things that it does and does not do. And I think the critical portion of this is that section that states that employers shall not, if they are to receive economic development incentive funds, engage in certain activity. Now, the activity therein listed is activity that is federally protected. The National Labor Relations Act sets out the scheme by which employers and employees are able to deal with these labor relations matters and deal with the selection of representatives. Now, the National Labor Relations Act provides in the text of the statute, as well as supplemented later through Supreme Court decisions, that there are two ways in which an employer and which an employee's representative or labor organization may be recognized. One is through voluntary recognition, and two would be through secret ballot elections. So this bill does, in fact, prohibit employers from engaging in federally protected activity under the National Labor Relations Act if they want to receive economic development incentive funds. The provision of this bill that deals with subcontractors, I think that the committee in their discussion had it right, that an employee as defined under this and under the National Labor Relations Act is not a 1099 individual. So 1099 individuals aren't covered by the National Labor Relations Act and aren't eligible for any kind of representation under that law. Lastly, the bill allows for the Department of Economic Development to investigate and potentially enforce the provisions of this agreement. So I want to talk a little bit about NLRA preemption. So the concept of preemption stems from the United States Constitution. Article 6, Clause 2, the Supremacy Clause, states that the Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. So the principle there is that where the federal government chooses to enter into an area and regulate in that area through legislation, that any other state efforts to change the way that regulation works or the relations between parties under that law is preempted because it frustrates the entire federal purpose and undercuts the supremacy of federal law. The Supreme Court decided in San Diego Building Trades Council versus Garmin in 1959, and again in Machinists versus the Wisconsin Employer Relations Commission in 1976, the extent of preemption. We're focused mostly on what we call Garmin preemption here, which is that when an activity is arguably subject to Section 7 or 8 of the NLRA, the states as well as the federal courts must defer to the exclusive competence of the National Labor Relations Board. The right to seek a representative is protected by Section 7. The right to seek voluntary recognition is protected by Section 7. It is not an unfair labor practice under Section 8 to voluntarily recognize a union. So this is conduct that is being prohibited by this bill that is squarely protected by federal law, and that's why this bill would be preempted by the National Labor Relations Act.
Thank you, Nicholas. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Next, our friend Mr. Brett Hume with the Carpenters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Brett Hume, Southeastern Carpenters. Not to duplicate at all the attorney's piece on the preemption, but why does the state feel the need to interject itself in the employer's decision? Any and every organizing campaign, the employer decides which path, either card check or secret ballot. So I'm confused as to why the state has to handcuff in order to receive incentives to one path. To line 29 and 30, the subcontractor piece. The governor has said in many forums he would like Georgia to be the #1 EV state, lead the industry. Well, there's a lot of EV coming in the future, so this bill would affect potential construction. If this bill passes, you have put future employers in the EV industry at an extreme awkward position, because under the Inflation Reduction Act, they get a 6% tax cut for manufacturing clean energy. They get an additional 24% tax cut if they use contractors with a certified registered training program. Those tax cuts are for 10 years. So I'm an employer. Is it better for me economically to ignore the incentives, or at worst case, pay them back to the state for 10 years worth of 30% tax cut on my business? Thirdly, because there's a learning curve with that act, a lot of these employers are still learning the process. So they may hire a non-union contractor, but then they do the math and they allow an organizing campaign to come in for the contractor to get the tax credits. Are you obligating them to pay these back? It sure sounds like it. This bill, whether you pass it or not, has zero effect on right to work status for the state of Georgia. Finally, I would suggest to you, under the Subcontractor Act, that you could potentially have a negative impact on the ports. I'm from Savannah. The longshoremen are subcontractors to the steamship lines. We're going to raise the bridge in the future, bringing more steamship lines to deliver goods and services to the southeast. Are we going to cripple them? And since the port is a state-funded operation, are you going to ask the port to pay you back any kind of incentives? This is all about smaller government. Why are you injecting into business? Lastly, I understand conditions on incentives. I get it. You are stewards of our money, and you want to guarantee some sort of positive return. This is not the avenue for that. If you really want to condition incentives, I would suggest to benefit all Georgians, some sort of percentage, 30, 40% use of Georgia workers to build these facilities. I can assure you, all the millions you've given Hyundai, you can't find 30% Georgia workers on that project today. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brett. Is a burning question here, real quick.
You brought up the Inflation Reduction Act, and you brought up EVs. Was there an incentive in there for states that wanted to build EVs to receive federal tax credits or incentives if they used union labor?
I'm not sure a state would get tax credits.
Well, was there an incentive for the states to use union labor?
No, there was this incentive to use certified registered training. It didn't say it had to be union.
Okay.
Because y'all just last year passed incentives for certified registered training through technical systems.
I understand that. I'm talking about the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed out of D.C.
Mm-hmm.
in relation to EVs.
All right, that's kind of off topic a little bit. Next, Randy Bell. Bell or Bill?
Bill. Close enough. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Building Trades Academy. Thank you for your time today. As an ordained Baptist preacher, I will tell you, I'll read fast if you'll listen fast. So I'll try to stay right within that time. I want to start with quoting from my favorite book, the King James Bible, Proverbs 29, verse 18, where there is no vision, the people perish. I want that verse to penetrate your minds and your hearts, and let that verse be your guide in all matters while you're working here at the Capitol. I'm asking you to not go blindly into this bill. Read every word, understand the direct consequences, which is the intended harm, but also examine the indirect consequences of harm as well. In Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, he ended like this, and I quote, "That we here highly resolve that the dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That government of the people, which you all are, by the people, which all of you were elected by the people, for the people." That statement is the true test, I believe, of any piece of legislation. Is the proposed legislation good for all people? Not party lines, not self, but all people. A pastor friend of mine clarified that word all for me, and he said all means all, and that's all that all means. Kind of makes it clear. It's kind of fun to say, too. This bill has been presented by a person of the people, that which we cannot deny. It has been entrusted with you that are elected by the people, that we cannot deny. But it does fall short when it comes to being for the people. I'm confident that each of you believe that people need representation, or you wouldn't be sitting here today. You represent the people, all people from your district, regardless of party, wealth, status, occupation, or even lack thereof. You even have the responsibility to represent those that did not vote for you. So I know that you believe in representation. However, this bill does not. And by that very means, it fails to be for the people. Representation needs not to stop at the footsteps of the state capitol, or should it be barred from the doorsteps of an employer, whether it's elected or voluntary. It has long been decided by the highest of courts that people deserve, in fact, have a right to have representation in the workplace if they freely choose to do so. This starts a process to deny those employees and even employers of that very right. That is not for the people. This bill is not only aimed at the people, but the employers of the said company, but it's also directed at the employers as well. If an employer makes a business decision and chooses to voluntarily recognize a representative of his or her employees' choosing, why would government want to penalize that company and those employees? We should want our businesses to feel free to engage in any partnership that they believe will legally make their businesses stronger, more viable, so they can employ more people. They should feel free to engage in those partnerships without fear of possible financial loss in payback of incentives proposed by this bill. Why would government want to interfere with business owners and their employees' decision? That is certainly not for the people. Like many people, or like many preachers, I'm near the end, so I'm going to take you back to the beginning. Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. Have vision, clear vision. See the consequences clearly through the eyes of employees and employers. See them through the eyes of all the people that you were sworn to represent. My prayer and my ask of this committee is that you will not let this bill see light outside of this room. God bless each one of you. I pray that you will have clear mind. I pray that you have made the right decision for all people. I pray that you will have a clear vision. I pray that you will be for the people. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. All right, next, Sandra Williams, Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council. So far, everybody's gone over, so you're gonna have to make it up. Be
Mr.
quick.
Chairman, thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you, committee. I will be very brief
Thank
in
you.
my comments. This is an interesting and pivotal time in our history as Americans. I can remember back, and most of you can, to 9/11, where the entire country pulled together, black, white, men, women, all of us, regardless of religions. Seems to be a time where we are pulling apart, and it's very hurtful. As I sit here, I don't want to share my age right now, but I will tell you that's over 50 years, now over 60 years, that I've witnessed changes that seem to be progressive and those that weren't. So I'm going to say a few things that I jotted down here. We tout ourselves as being the best place for business, but none of those businesses would operate without workers. And I know those of you that are busy thinking about where we can position our state and continue to be the best place. We know that without workers in the workplace, those businesses don't operate. When you talk about labor, because I've had the pleasure and the benefit of working as a corporate HR manager, and now I work in labor as president of the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council. We can work together. There's an annual conference that many of you are aware of, the Georgia Labor Management Conference, where we have examples of productivity between companies and workers, where we work on efficiencies, where companies tout their relationships with their workers. I only ask, this bill puts a greater divide. We talk about, again, the best place for business, when we should, and I heard Senator Hodges bring up several times about a right to work state. You know, this past January, 25 states came out with an increased labor wage, minimum wage. We haven't done that. And I went through the list thinking that we were going to be one of them, and we weren't. Our state minimum wage is $5.15 an hour. And there are people that fall within that state minimum wage. When you talk about right to work, there's no one here that decides that they don't want to be, and when I say here in Georgia, that decides that they don't want to be a member of a union that's forced to join. But if they are in a facility that has a union, and those union workers get a wage increase, so do the non-union members. So I only ask that that is the kind of consideration, that is the kind of thought that we have as we go forward. How can we make not only Georgia the best place for businesses, but also the best place for workers? And so I thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Tony Tilley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm Tony Tilley. I'm a senior campaign lead for the Communications Works of America and a 33-year employee of one of the largest telecommunications companies in this country. Why does this bill matter to me? My company in the past has taken these tax incentives. And how does it affect us? Well, we opened a wireless call center in Cedartown, Georgia with tax incentives. At the time that we opened that call center, our company's wireless department was not unionized. But we got bought by another Bell company in Texas. And guess what? Theirs was. So they decided to let us all unionize if we wanted. And our company chose card checked because they had rather work with their employees than go through the intimidation that happens during a secret ballot election. Understand that is when most of the intimidation happens, is during that period between the recognition that there's going to be an election and that election date. Also, why is it important for us to go by federal law? This is our contract We have employees in 50 states, but when we negotiate our contract in District 3, it covers the 9 southeastern states. We don't negotiate state by state. So my company should have a right to go get these jobs and these incentives, and I hope they do. There's over $1 billion of broadband money coming down. The state's gonna funnel that out. Is that gonna handcuff my company from bidding on those? Because my company chooses to do card check instead of secret ballot. Now, the company still has that right, but me personally, I don't believe the government should tell a company how to run their business. In fact, when my company required our employees to be vaccinated against COVID, required us, it didn't matter if I had my 33 years, if I didn't get that shot, I was gonna be terminated. And we reached out to the governor's office, and I bring this up because they admitted this is his bill. And he had a phone call with my vice president of District 3, Richard Honeycutt. And he told Richard, he said, Richard, I'm not gonna tell a business how to run their business and how to handle their employees. All I'm asking is let's be straight across the board. Let's stay out of their business. Let our companies make their choice under the federal law. I would love it to be the employee's choice. But guess what? You can't pass a state bill in the state that says the employees get to make that choice. It would also be against the NLRA. So I'm asking that this body here, that we do not vote for this bill, that we vote to let businesses have their own rights to their employees and to do their choices and make their decisions based on what they feel is best for them, and do not handcuff companies that may be the best in their industry, the ones that you may want to build stuff in this state, because we have the best builders, the best workers, and we want that right to be able to bid on these jobs without being told, no, you can't because you have a union. Thank you, sir. That's my 3 minutes.
Thank you, Tony. All right, both the last two stay within their time. That was nice. Now, Senator Hodges, come back up and we'll see if you have any questions of the committee, and then we're going to take action. All right, is this Senator Harbison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, in light of some of the comments I heard from people in various stations, an attorney and other people working for labor unions, saying that why do we have to go by labor law and all that? How do you feel about the fact that almost everyone said it does preempt? So how can you justify the language somewhere that will satisfy my point of view that it does not preempt federal law?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that question. Obviously, it's the position of the governor and the governor's staff that this bill does not preempt federal law, because basically what you're talking about is a business agreement between a business and the owners of that business and the state, whereby that business gets something. Basically, they get taxpayer money. And I believe that the taxpayer money, we're all stewards of the state's taxpayer money, and I believe the state has a right to provide incentives. I believe the state has a right to put conditions on those incentives, particularly conditions that protect the rights of the citizens of Georgia. And those rights include the right to provide or privately decide about whether or not you want to be represented by a union. So I believe that from the federal law standpoint, again, nobody is telling a business that they have to do this. A business comes to Georgia, they don't have to do secret ballot, but if they're gonna take our money, our incentives, then they have to. So, nobody's being coerced into doing this.
But the volunteer, they have to sign something, if I may continue, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, real quick, please.
Okay. If they have to sign something to agree to something that appears to be against National Labor Relations Board edicts, isn't that in itself is just
Well, I mean,
contradictory?
Well, opinions can vary as to whether it's against national labor law edicts, obviously, but, you know, you got to think that the owners of a company want to come to Georgia, and the people who run the state both intelligently look at a business deal. That business deal being, you bring your company to this state, we want you here, we're going to give you some incentives, some money from our taxpayers to help you move here, to help you get set up, to help you provide jobs, and the only thing that we ask is if there are legally available a secret ballot, if you choose to vote on unionizing, then you use that secret ballot. And it's your choice, you know, to do that as a company. It's your choice to sign the memorandum of understanding that you'll do that, and nobody's holding it over your head that you have to do it.
Thank you.
Senator Merritt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator?
Yes, ma'am.
I of course have issues with this bill. I don't see how it promotes business in Georgia. You said that, we are using taxpayer money, but aren't those taxpayers also the workers that we need to power those businesses?
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay, so this bill, as it's written, seems like it would be harder to win more people into the union or to unionize. And I don't know if you're aware, but when workers join unions, there is higher pay as well as better benefits with health care.
Well, Senator Merritt, I mean, would you agree that it's your decision as a worker, your decision whether or not you want to be represented?
That is correct.
Okay. Then all this does is say that you get the opportunity to make that decision in private without somebody standing over you, with a bunch of people standing around saying, here's a form. You know, here's a form. You sign this form, and everybody's looking, and you're going to be unionized. And if you don't want to be, then you may sign that form anyway just because everybody's around and looking at you. And all this does is give somebody the opportunity to make that decision in private.
And just to note, because the preemption issue is still in question.
I understand.
And because of that, I really don't think the state has jurisdiction, because we've already stated that the National Labor Relations Board.
Would you say the state has jurisdiction as to how it spends its taxpayers' dollars?
That is correct.
Well, I think that's just what we're doing here.
But the National Labor Board also has jurisdiction over our labor unions, and that has been codified in federal law. And if I'm not mistaken, federal law does supersede state law.
Senator, I honor your opinion.
Good questions, good back and forth. Thank you very much to everybody that came. Now I want to know what the will of the committee is on this. Mike 7.
Make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to pass the Senate Bill 362, LC number 540296-EC.
Have a motion to pass. Have a second from Senator Cowsert. I hate to say this, but I've said it on every other one. Any further discussion? All right.
Hate to do this, but I would like to make a comment too. Senator, I want to thank you for bringing this bill and the governor for supporting it. I may be looking at it differently than other people, but I don't think it forces a business to do anything. It simply says if they want to utilize Georgia taxpayer funds, they need to provide privacy in these elections. And I'm amazed that the representatives of the employees aren't clamoring for this. Because by having a private ballot, just like we do in our elections, it keeps the companies from bullying the people or terminating or punishing people that want union representation. And it prevents union organizers from punishing employees that reject them. I just don't get it where this isn't the best of all worlds and the preferable method of conducting union elections.
Isn't that correct?
I'm not cross-examining.
All right. Any further discussion? We're gonna, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, do pass. 4 for do pass. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 3 opposed. With 4 to 3, it passes. Thank you very much. God. I thought I had that turned off. All right. Thank you very much. That concludes our business for today. Appreciate everybody hanging in there with us. The meeting's adjourned.